over to Sam.
Okay, thank you, Auntie. Okay, hello everyone. It's nice to be with y'all. Uh, I don't know what comes to your mind first when you listen to these three words: Ecclesiastes, Job, Song of Songs. Maybe Job, yeah, I think some of us might know the story. But Ecclesiastes, for me, I had to reach a certain age just to be able to pronounce the word correctly. Okay, it's such a strange and difficult word. And but the message of the book is actually not all that complex. Okay, uh, same with Job and Song of Songs. Now, these three books are actually full of poetry. Like there's a lot of poetry in it. Okay, uh, until recently we were seeing a lot of story, right? Until last week. Last week was again poetry, Psalms, Proverbs, very poetical. Now, what's the purpose of poetry? If you can say something just like that, why complicate it and try to make it poetical or use poetry and make it rhyme and all that? Uh, so think about the stars. You can learn about the stars. You can understand how big they are, how far they are, and all of that. Right? That's one way to uh, learn about the stars. But there's the other way, which is to learn a poem about the stars. And probably all of us are familiar with that poem, right? Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. What's the point of that poem? Why make poetry at all? Poetry kind of speaks to our emotions, okay? More than just facts. Facts goes to our head, but poetry should like make us feel it, right? So that's the point of poetry. That's why there's poetry. And these three books are full of poetry, and they're also called wisdom books, which means they're supposed to make us wise. Again, when we speak about wisdom, we immediately think, oh, okay, that's something to do with our head. We need to think this and that. But our emotions are also part of who we are. And these books kind of help us to not just to think wisely, but to feel wisely. Okay. Uh, but let's just get into it. And as we go along, we will figure things out. Right. So these are our three books: Ecclesiastes, Job, and Song of Songs. And first, we will look at Ecclesiastes. Okay. Now, in this book, we meet this man called the teacher. Okay. And he wants to tell us something. What does he want to say? He looks at everything in life. Okay. You can think of this like a teacher and that box, that smaller picture box, something like a whiteboard or green boards you all have today, I suppose. Uh, right. And the teacher wants you to look at that. The teacher is showing you something and then teaching you something, right? And this teacher shows you regular life, just everyday life of people. And the teacher says, meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. This is the teacher's lesson. Okay. So this is what the teacher wants to teach you. Very strange thing to teach, right? But anyway, and then the teacher says, gives reasons as to why the teacher says that. Okay. And the teacher first says, okay, let's think about wisdom, righteousness, and justice. The teacher says, oh, you think wisdom is this impartial thing? This statue is called Lady Justice, and she's blindfolded, as you can see, right? Basically to show that justice is supposed to be blindfolded. It shouldn't be partial to anyone. Okay, it should just be very, very precise. And this teacher tells us, well, this is what you think justice is. But in reality, this is life. Okay. The people who are powerful and rich, they get a much better deal in life. So it's not all, justice isn't really there. There is no justice. Okay. So the teacher says, again, I looked and saw all the oppression that was taking place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressors, and they have no comforter. And I declared that the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive. But better than both is the one who has never been born, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun. Huh. Here is the teacher saying, because there's all this evil and injustice, you know what? It's better to have never even been born. It's uh, a very sad thought, very sad thing to say. But and perhaps you're wondering, how can this be there in the Bible? I mean, and that's a good question to have, right? That's a question we should keep asking, and we will kind of get to an answer towards the end. So just be patient for a few minutes. Anyway, so that's the first thing. Righteousness, we just looked at justice, right? And justice, the teacher says, is not really there. And then the teacher says, okay, let's look at these two things. Some of you might know this man over here. This is Einstein, a very intelligent, smart, brilliant guy. And then there's the fish. And then the teacher says, you know what? At the end of the day, both, whether you are Einstein or whether you are a fish, you're going to die, right? And he says, the wise, like the fool, will not be long remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten, like the fool. The wise too must die. So both of them, in the end, whether you're Einstein or a fish, you're going to die. So what difference does it really make in life? Or he says, okay, let's next look at these two people. This is Anne Frank, who was a good girl, a good person. And then the one on the other side is Mao, who was a very, very evil man. Okay. And Anne Frank, both of them died, but Anne Frank died at age 16, and Mao lived to be a nice old man. So the teacher looks at all this and he says, in this meaningless life of mine, I have seen both of these, the righteous perishing in their righteousness and the wicked living long in their wickedness. So do not be over righteous, neither be over wise. Why destroy yourself? Also, don't be over wicked and don't be a fool. Why die before your time? It is good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. Whoever fears God will avoid all extremes. Here's a teacher in the Bible telling us, don't try to be too righteous, because it doesn't really help. It doesn't make a difference. Again, maybe that's shocking. Maybe that's very surprising. It should be, because that is part of that is part of what the teacher is trying to do. Okay, just a few more minutes and we will get an answer to that. And he says there is something else meaningless that occurs on earth. The righteous who get what the wicked deserve, and the wicked get what the righteous deserve. This too I say is meaningless. Okay, so I commend the enjoyment of life. So the teacher says, well, whether you're righteous or wicked or whatever, at the end of the day, you're going to die anyway. So just go out and enjoy life. Because there is nothing better for a person under the sun than to eat and drink and be happy, to be glad. Then joy will accompany them in their toil all the days of the life God has given them under the sun. So just enjoy. And then he says, okay, now that we've decided to enjoy, let's think about that. Let's think about pleasure. So he says, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. You see, this teacher is looking at everyday life, looking at things in life, showing that to us and trying to prove to us his point of view. And he says, come now, I will test you with pleasure, find out what is good. He says, but pleasure also proved meaningless. This is what he says. He says, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and vineyards for myself and gardens and parks and fruit trees and herds and flocks and gold and silver. I denied myself nothing that my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor. And this was the reward for all my toil. But when I looked at all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. He says, just a little time before, he said, well, don't forget about being righteous or wicked. That doesn't matter. Just enjoy. But now he's saying, you know what? Actually, even enjoying is actually meaningless. It doesn't really satisfy. And he says, look, that's why I told you in the very beginning, meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And these are the last words that the teacher says, okay? But in the book of Ecclesiastes, after the teacher goes away, another man comes into the picture, okay? And he adds some final conclusions. And this is what he says. He says, now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commands, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. The teacher kept saying, everything is meaningless. Everyone has the same end. But this man, in the end, who gives the conclusion, he comes and says, well, he pulls in a little bit of a different direction. He says, well, actually, God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing. So there is something there. But then the book just ends with that. That's the final statement in the book. Okay? And so at this point, we're wondering, okay, what on earth is this book even about? Why is this book even there in the Bible? Shouldn't the Bible make you feel happy and cheerful? This book makes you feel sad and confused, right? And now to find the key to unlock this book, let's look at what this teacher said. Meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. That's something he keeps saying. But there's something else he keeps saying. And that is this phrase, under the sun. He says it a lot of times in the book. Okay. And that tells us something about this teacher's method. Okay. About how this teacher is reaching all these crazy conclusions. He is only looking at life under the sun. That is life on earth, right? What he can see and observe with his eyes, right? So what the teacher is really trying to do is trying to find meaning in life without God. And because of that, the teacher concludes that life is meaningless. Okay? And this is very crucial. It is this key that unlocks the entire book of Ecclesiastes. Okay? Here is the teacher proving to you, actually what he's really proving is not that every life is meaningless, but that life without God is meaningless. That life under the sun, if you only look at everything under the sun, then life is meaningless. Now, the teacher also talks about God here and there, okay, in the book. But this teacher, the God he speaks about is more like this generic God. The teacher's God is a God who just created the world and let it run. This God doesn't really get involved in the life of people. In other words, this isn't the God of the Bible at all, right? This is a very distant God, a God who doesn't even exist in that sense. But he isn't speaking about the God who has revealed himself. Okay. At one point, he even says, we can never really know what God is doing. But we can, because God has revealed it. Just because we can't see it under the sun, it doesn't mean that it's not there, right? But okay, fine. Here's a person, a teacher, trying to make meaning, trying to find meaning in life under the sun. But why is it there in the Bible? That is a question we can still ask. And to kind of understand that, here's a quick video I want you all to watch. Okay, it's an advertisement. Okay, here it is.
नमस्ते रामचरण जी, आपकी चिट्ठी। ये गंजो
डॉक्टर घनश्याम इज्जत कमाने के लिए इतना कुछ किया और इत्तू से के लिए गवा दी ना। घर पे लगाओ नेरोलैक सुरक्षा, सिर्फ इत्तू से पैसों में बारिश और धूप से सुरक्षा और आपकी इज्जत।
Okay, you're probably wondering why on earth was there a strange advertisement? But the advertisement, what's the advertisement trying to do? It is showing life without Nerolac paints. And by doing that, it's actually advertising for Nerolac paints, right? Saying, hey, if you have Nerolac paints, guess what? People will respect you, right? Here's another ad. And watch this in that same way, having that in mind. Huh? This is an ad for an inverter, a UPS, and in the house, UPS, that one. Okay, here it is.
त्र्यंबके गौरी नारायणी नमस्तुते, बच्चे को अन्न खिलाइए। ओम भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं। ये को भी अभी जाना था।
कहीं अंधेरे में खुशी के पल खो न जाए।
पेश है Luminous Inverters and Batteries.
Okay, so that was trying to show what life without Luminous Inverter looks, right? And you will make mistakes like giving the spoon to the wrong mouth and things like that. But by doing that, these advertisements advertise for the inverter, for the UPS, right? And similarly, Ecclesiastes shows us what life without God, the God who has revealed himself, the God we all worship, what does life without God look like? That's what the book of Ecclesiastes shows. So the book of Ecclesiastes advertises for life with the Lord by demonstrating what life without the Lord looks like. Okay. Often we don't realize how much meaning God gives us, right? Like a fish in a water that never realizes what life outside water will be. We can make that mistake about not realizing how big a part of our lives God is and how much of our meaning, how much we're able to live meaningful lives because of God. And when we read Ecclesiastes, we understand what life without God would look like. What would life be if death really was the end, right? So that's why the book of Ecclesiastes is there in the Bible. It's the question for which the rest of the Bible is the answer in some sense, okay? So that's the book of Ecclesiastes. It makes us wise by showing us what life without God would be. Let's move on. The next book is the book of Job. Now, many of us know the story of Job. Job was living a happy life, and then the scene shifts to heaven, and God and Satan have a conversation. And God says, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears evil and fears God and shuns evil. But then Satan says, well, really, I mean, come on, does Job fear God for nothing? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flock and herd and are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. Satan says, yeah, well, that's because Job has a very nice, comfortable life. Let's see what will happen if you take away all that from him. So that's what happens to Job. Okay, disaster strikes. God gives permission to Satan, and Job goes through a lot of trouble. Okay. And then God says, but Job still maintains his integrity. Though you made me bring disaster on Job, he still is a good person. And Satan says, yeah, well, actually, bring illness also on him. Then we'll see what happens. Okay. And so that's what happens. Job is filled, his body is covered with boils, and then his friends hear about Job's misery and they come. Okay, so when Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. Now, here's what we must understand about the book of Job. Totally, it is 42 chapters, but only the first 2 chapters are story, and we've already seen that story. Okay, the next 39 and a half chapters is actually poetry, and finally we have half a chapter of story again. Okay, so we really must feel the poetry of Job to understand the book of Job. Okay, and Job, till now he wasn't complaining, but now he starts complaining, and he says, why did I not perish at birth and die as I came from the womb? And then his friends also start speaking, and they say, hey, Job, wait up. Whoever who was innocent has ever perished. As I have observed, those who plow evil and those who sow trouble reap it. You get what you deserve, Job. But Job says, now be so kind as to look at me. Would I light your face? Do not be unjust. Reconsider, for my integrity is at stake. Is there any wickedness on my lips? Job says, well, no, really, I really didn't do anything wrong. And we actually know that Job is telling the truth because God himself said that Job has done nothing wrong, right? But the friends don't know that. So the friends keep speaking more and more, and they say, the next friend comes along and says, how long will you say such things? Does God pervert justice? Does the Almighty pervert what is right? They say, you know what? Of course, you must have done something wrong because God is just. And so it must be the fault must be on your side. And Job even acknowledges, he said, if I am guilty, too bad for me. But he goes on to say, no, but I'm not guilty. And then another friend comes and he gets upset and he says, are all these words to go unanswered? Is no one going to stop Job from speaking about God like this? Will no one rebuke you when you mock? And this friend says, can you fathom the mysteries of God? Can you probe the limits of the Almighty? They are higher than the heavens above. What can you do? They are deeper than the depths below. What can you know? Their measure is longer than the earth and wider than the sea. Very wise words from his friends, actually. They're saying, Job, we know so little about life, so you shouldn't be really speaking so much. And Job says, well, doubtless you are the only people who matter and wisdom will die with you. He's being sarcastic there. But I have a mind as well as you, and I am not inferior to you. Who does not know all these things? But I desire to speak to the Almighty and to argue my case with God. You, however, smear me with lies. You are worthless physicians, all of you. If only you would be altogether silent. For you, that would be wisdom. Hear now my argument. Listen to the pleas of my lips. He says, well, yeah, okay, fine. You are so eager to accuse me, but guess what? Can anyone bring charges against me? If so, I will be silent and die. Just say what I did wrong. Why do I deserve all this suffering? And then I will be silent. And then Job speaks to God directly. And Job says, God, only grant me these two things. First, withdraw your hand from me and stop frightening me with your terrors. Okay, stop bringing all the suffering. Then call me and I will answer. Or let me speak and you reply to me. How many wrongs and sins have I committed? Show me my offense and my sin. Job has like next level confidence in his own innocence, right? I mean, how many of us would dare to say to God, God, show me what I did wrong? But Job does, okay? So he is really, really determined. And this brings us to end of round one of the conversation. I don't know how many of y'all noticed, but there was a clear pattern in which it happened, right? Job speaks, friend speaks, Job speaks again, another friend will speak, and then the other friend will speak, and then Job will speak again. So that's round one. And like this, they go on for two more rounds, okay? So we saw the first two chapters of the book of Job is story. Then Job spoke for one chapter, then Eliphaz's friend spoke for 2 chapters, Job spoke for 2 chapters, another friend spoke for 1 chapter, Job spoke for 2 chapters, and then a third friend spoke for 1 chapter, and then Job replied again to them. And that is round 1. Okay, so we are just touching the surface of the book of Job, okay? And we don't have time to do any more of that also. So round 2 goes on the same way, and round 3 as well. And it is at this point that a new friend enters the scene. And this is this guy named Elihu, okay? And so far he's been silent, but now suddenly after 3 rounds, he comes and here's what he says. He begins by saying, listen to me. I too will tell you what I know. I waited while you spoke. I gave you my full attention, but not one of you has proved Job wrong. None of you has answered his arguments. This friend comes and says, hey, you know what? Job is actually right. He's actually innocent. You guys couldn't prove him wrong. So it looks like he gets it, okay? He understands something more. And then he speaks to Job. He says, but Job, listen to my words. Pay attention to everything I say. Answer me then, if you can. Stand up and argue your case before me. This is like in school, we'll have all these friend groups, and then we might be arguing over something. And suddenly one friend will get up and say, hey guys, okay, wait, I know all the answer to this. Let me deal with this. Let me take over. Okay, so that's this guy, that's this friend. And he says, God may speak in people's ears and terrify them with warnings to turn them from wrongdoing and keep them from pride, to preserve them from danger. Okay, what is that? Sounds a bit strange, but his basic point is, okay, Job, you are innocent now, but God is doing all this so that through this, God prevents you from falling into some greater danger in the future, to preserve you from danger. So that's what God is doing. After all, how great is God? He's beyond our understanding. Right? So he manages to reach some kind of a middle ground. He says, yeah, Job, you're innocent, and God is also just. No problem. Problem solved. Right? But then suddenly another character appears, and that is God himself. Okay? And God himself suddenly speaks, and he speaks straight to Job, and he just completely pushes away all these friends and their arguments and all that, and he gets straight to it. And he says, God says, why do you confuse the issue? Why do you talk without knowing what you're talking about? Pull yourself together, Job. Up on your feet. Stand tall. I have some questions for you, and I want some straight answers. Where were you when I created the earth? Tell me, since you know so much. Who decided on its size? Certainly you'll know that. Who came up with the blueprints and measurements? So for 4 straight chapters, God goes on and bombards Job with words like this, okay? And Job can't take it. Finally, he says, you told me, listen, and let me do the talking. Let me ask the questions. You give the answers. I admit I once lived by rumors of you, but now I have it all firsthand. From my own eyes and ears. I'm sorry, forgive me. I'll never do that again, I promise. So that's what Job says. Job realizes, he's like, oh gosh, I spoke so much about things I didn't understand. But now I have seen God himself. And that is enough for Job. bit of a strange answer, right? Because God doesn't reveal why Job actually went through all that suffering. God doesn't say, tell to Job, hey, Job, yeah, well, me and Satan had a bet on you, and well done, you did a good job. No, instead, God does this, right? So Job, till the end, never knows something that we all know, which is why Job suffered. And then God gifts Job with a double blessing, and he has a nice, happy life, and he dies an old man. And that brings us to the end of the book of Job. Again, a strange book. But what is the message of the book of Job? It helps us understand the pain of those who suffer innocently. Okay? And God is on their side, just like God was on the side of Job. Okay? In the end, God accepts Job and blames Job's friends, even though it was the friends who were defending God. So this book, when we hear Job protest, cry out, we can understand the pain of those who suffer innocently. But Job wasn't perfect. He also made some mistakes. Job's mistakes was the same mistake as his friends in one sense, okay, right? The friends spoke about Job without knowing about Job, and Job spoke about God without knowing about God. So God scolds Job for that. Job's friends, when they speak, they all speak about God, okay? They're passionately speaking about God. But Job speaks directly to God himself, okay? And that's, I think, one of the main reasons why God appreciates Job and blames his friends. And again, God says, hey, Job, I am too great, and creation is too great for you to understand. How are you going to understand the Creator if you cannot even understand creation? Which is a point that Job's friends already made, but now the difference is that God himself is making it. And that makes a big difference for Job, okay? He encountered God. That is really what made the difference for Job at the end of the day. And we must not forget that Job till the end never finds out why he suffered. And so even today, the question of why innocent people suffer is a big question. It's a burning question. But we don't know the answer. God, for whatever reason, in his wisdom, doesn't reveal that. But instead, like what God did to Job, God has revealed himself to us so that we can have an encounter with him. And that is a message of the book of Job. And now, for our final book, the Song of Songs. This is basically a collection of love poems, okay? So a man and a woman, and they just keep singing to each other. We'll celebrate, we'll sing, we'll make great music. Oh, my dear friend, you're so beautiful. Your eyes are beautiful like doves. And you, my dear lover, you're so handsome. Basically, a man and a woman just singing to each other, okay? Then, so that's what the book is, okay? It's full of this imagery where they are in a garden and enjoying themselves and singing to each other, and they just want to be with each other. It's a book that celebrates romantic love, okay? So they say things like, your beauty is too much for me. I'm in over my head. I'm not used to this. I can't take it in, and things like that, okay? So, the entire book is just this, love poetry, okay? For 8 chapters, this is what is there. Now, why is a book about a man and a woman's love songs to each other? Why is such a book there in the Bible? Well, often we think that the Bible is a spiritual book, and so we must go to the Bible for spiritual answers to spiritual questions. But the truth is, the Bible is not a book about our spiritual life. It is a book about our life. And so the Bible covers every area of our life and wants us to enjoy every area of our life, right? So here's a book celebrating romantic love. And in the end, towards the end, they go on to say, the woman would say this: love is invincible, facing danger and death. Even danger and death can't really overcome love. The fire of love stops at nothing. It sweeps everything before it. Floodwaters can't drown love. Love can't be bought. Love can't be sold. It's not to be found in the marketplace. Love is so strong. Love is so beautiful, so amazing, so powerful. And here's the best thing about it. It's not expensive. It can't, in fact, even if you want it to be expensive, it can't, because you can't buy love. You can't find it in the marketplace. It is something that you enjoy, that anybody can enjoy. And this is a book that celebrates that. And the last line in the book is, run to me, dear lover, come like a gazelle, leap like a wild stag on the Spice Mountains. Okay, so full of love poetry. That's the book. And the book comes to an end with those words. But why is this book there in the Bible? Yes, we've already hinted at an answer, because the Bible speaks to all of life, and love is beautiful, love is part of life, and here's the Bible celebrating that. But what can we learn? How does this book make us wise? And for that, we can ask 3 questions. Is it a love poem between a man and a woman? Well, as we saw, it clearly is. But many have also said that it metaphorically, okay, or symbolically also speaks about the love between Israel and God. In the Old Testament, Israel was God's chosen people. So God and God's people, we can think of it like that. Or is it a love poem between Jesus and the church? We, the church, those of us who believe in Jesus, we are called the bride of Christ. Okay, so a very romantic language. Okay, and for us that might sound really weird, but that's what the Bible says. Okay, so what's the answer? What is the book? The answer is yes to all 3. Right? Here's a book that celebrates love, particularly romantic love, and in so doing also celebrates the love between God and his people. Okay, because oftentimes in the Bible, God and his people are also seen as lovers. So that's why this book is there. Here's the other interesting thing. As you saw how the song ended, right? It ended very abruptly, right? Because the song has ended, but the love songs that they sing to each other hasn't ended. The Song of Songs has no conclusion, because love has no conclusion. There's this verse in the Bible which says, and now these 3 remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love, right? So love never concludes. Love overcomes even death, as this song said. So a very different picture of life compared to the life we saw in Ecclesiastes, right? Who said, well, death is the end, so everything is meaningless. So this is the book of Song of Songs, right? It's a love song that 2 lovers sing to each other. So these are the 3 books, okay? Books of poetry, strange books, books that perhaps we can't really understand all of it immediately. It takes time to understand, but books that speak about life, all of life, and books that make us wise, right? Not just does it tell us what to think in our head, but it tells us what and makes us feel wisely. So when we read the Song of Songs, for example, we feel we enjoy, we appreciate love even more, right? It's one thing to know that, oh, love is great. That's in our head. But to really feel it, you should read a poem about love. And that's what the Song of Songs does, right? We all know that it is tragic when innocent people suffer. But to really feel it in our bones, in our heart, we should read the book of Job. We all know in our heads that life without God is meaningless. But to really feel it, we should read the book of Ecclesiastes. Right? So that's the message in these 3 books. So strange books, but interesting books as well. So whenever you get time, you should kind of open up these books and read here and there. I think you might enjoy it. Today, we've just been able to scratch the surface just a little bit. Okay, but that's what I want to leave you all with. Let us pray as we close. Father God, we thank you for your word, for the Bible, which is so diverse and complex, which speaks to all of our lives and which makes us wise so that we know not just what to think, but also helps us feel how we must feel when we look at life. Lord, make us wise. Make us wise in your eyes as we read your word, as we encounter you, meet you through your word, and as we live a life that is pleasing to you. We pray for all of us. Be with us throughout this coming week and help us, Lord, to live faithfully to you. All this I ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so all right, children. Thank you all